My name is Neith. I work for University of Maryland Extension, and I'm here today with Eric Hines from the USDA NRCS, which stands for United States Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources Conservation Service. And Eric, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more?
Yes, I am the district conservationist is my official title, and the jurisdiction that I cover is the Carroll County, Maryland, Baltimore County, Maryland, and Baltimore City. It's the area that I provide service to.
Thank you. So we're recording this video today. Eric has kindly agreed to talk with us about NRCS. This is part of a conservation collaboration grant funded by NRCS to help historically underserved farmers better access NRCS resources. So we're going to be talking today about what NRCS does. And to help us have this conversation, I've written up kind of a little fictional farm couple based on an amalgamation of the many different people I've talked with over the years. And we're going to kind of talk through from their perspective what it would be like to try to access NRCS resources. So I'm going to think now from the perspective of Ann Murphy and Eduardo Garcia Alvarez. They're a couple. Ann grew up in Washington, D.C., and Eduardo grew up in Peru on a potato farm. They own a home in suburban Maryland on a 1/4-acre lot. And Ann currently works in the hospitality industry, and Eduardo works as a teacher. They've been growing vegetables for themselves and their neighbors for years, but their dream is to start a farm that would grow fruits and vegetables for local market and focus on specialty crops that are not currently available in Maryland, such as sugarcane and heirloom varieties of potato. They also would like to have a petting zoo, and Ann would like to explore options for on-farm processing to create value-added products. So they've come to Eric to learn more about NRCS and what resources are available to them now and in the future if they start their farm enterprise. So first I'd like to ask, what is USDA NRCS?
Okay, so we've already done a good job. We explained what the acronym is. That's what we always have to do with the government, but it stands for the Natural Resource Conservation Service. We used to have a different name, and which was called the Soil Conservation Service, and a lot of people still remember us by our old name. But we've been around for 80 plus years now, I think. As an agency, we're a sub-agency within USDA. There's lots of different sub-agencies with USDA, but our main mission is to improve and protect and conserve natural resources on private lands through cooperative partnerships with local and state agencies. Our main goals are to provide to farmers and landowners conservation technical assistance, and we deliver this through providing conservation planning for producers and landowners, conservation practice design, and help with implementation of those practices. And then finally, and this is maybe something, it's newer to us in the past 20 years of our 80 years. We didn't do it for the greater part of our existence, but we now have financial assistance, we call it, or some people like to call it cost share, to help people implement these conservation practices.
Thank you. Sounds like a lot of different things fall under NRCS.
Yeah.
So Anna and Eduardo, they're growing vegetables right now for themselves and their neighbors, but they'd like to do more for market. At what point, what qualifies someone as a farmer? At what point do you become a farm?
So that's kind of a pretty there's a broad definition there. It used to be a lot more specific, but I would say particularly as we've moved into working with more produce farmers that are like Ann and Eduardo, the definition has broadened. So it used to be very specific and very rigid around like a certain amount of farm income and everything. But basically right now for NRCS's purposes, our agency, we can work with anybody, but generally what we're looking for is land that is capable of producing a crop or growing or raising livestock. And that covers a lot of territory, obviously. And depending on other agencies within USDA, they may have different definitions. It may also change with other, state and local governments all have different sort of definitions, whether it's income based or tax assessment based. We don't have really any of those restrictions. Like I said, it just has to, you have land that you have control of, either by owning it or having some sort of agreement to rent it, in like Anne and Eduardo's case, and can make decisions on the property. So for that's all we really need.
Awesome. And that sounds like it focuses on kind of the legal suitability of the place you're farming, not necessarily the soil. So it would, if someone were trying to grow hydroponically in a high tunnel or in a greenhouse, that would still count probably.
Yeah, it's just the ability to make, a lot of it is about being able to make a decision. I'll say frequently, sometimes we get people who like, and you may have run into this, where, oh, I'm thinking about this property that they don't own, or I'm going to purchase a property. Well, you don't have any legal control over it. So we can't really, I could talk to you on the phone, but I can't really interact with you in any other way because you don't have any authority over that property. That makes sense.
That does. Thank you. So if they were to take the next step and rent a field perhaps to start their farm enterprise, what would they need to do to become eligible for USDA's EQIP programs? And what does EQIP stand for again? Okay,
I'll start. Maybe that's a good thing. We're going to throw that around. It's another acronym. It stands for the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. It's been around since the 1996 Farm Bill. That's when it first came out. I would say it's our main program through NRCS to help people implement conservation practices on their land, and funding these things. We have some other smaller ones and some come and go, but this is sort of the stalwart in terms of what we use and provides the most money. So really the first steps are, with anybody, particularly if they're new, is getting yourself established with USDA and getting your farm records established. So you can contact us, we can come out, we can meet with you. But if you want to go to that next step, like we're talking about, is really they need to contact their local USDA service center, which we have ones in Maryland, in every county, and contact specifically, it's sort of our sister agency called the Farm Service Agency. FSA is the acronym we'll use, and most people are familiar with. And they're the sort of the record keepers. And what you do is you would set up an appointment with them, and you need to go in and tell them, first off, where is the property located? Because one of the things you need to get assigned to your property is a farm and tract number. That's sort of that's our way of identifying land and the numbers that we use. And if in some cases it may already have one, if someone else was farming the land before, but if it doesn't, you'll need to have the address of where it is, if it's, and be able to point it out on a map so they can assign it a number, and then it'll have that number. Then the next most important thing, and this sometimes you need to think, it's good to think about this before you come in, is how do you want to do, as we like to say, business with USDA? How do you want to conduct business? And that is, there's usually basically two ways, and they're gonna ask you this when you come in to set up your records. Do you want to do it as an individual, which could be, is it Eduardo's name or
Anne's name,
and or do you have a business, like an entity? You formed a corporation, an LLC, a joint partnership, something where you're going to probably, the biggest distinction is one's probably using a social security number, and the other one you have some sort of EIN number, business ID number that you're going to use. So, because that has to be consistent. So you need to think about that. A lot of people want to say, oh, I have a farm that's called Happy Acres, but it's just a name. In reality, you're just, you're Ann Murphy, and that's who you are. And that's how you do business. So deciding that, if you do have like a business enterprise set up, you need to bring in some supporting documentation, which most should have, like who can sign, the big one thing there is, like, you're signing up for stuff, who has signature authority, particularly if there's multiple members. You'll need to to show that. Next is banking information. Because if you're planning on at some point, maybe not right away, but eventually if you want to receive funds from us, everything is direct deposit. So you'll need to provide some banking information, which is just simply account and routing numbers. And then obviously your business ID, your social security. And the important thing is this has to match the way you do taxes because everything's got to align. So if you're doing taxes one way and your bank account's another way, you need to get those things straight. It's good to get that. You don't have to have all this right away to sign up, but it's good to get those two things aligned, or at least align them. And then finally, just really, if it's the property is somewhere different than where you actually live, a mailing address, phone number, contact information, email is really what you're going to need to get those things established. And then from there, we can once all that's done, then you're good until something you need to update or change something.
Yeah. So you need to make sure that the information you give is such that if USDA issues you a check, the check is written out in the name of whoever will pay taxes on it.
Yes. At the end of the day, you will get a 1099 if you ever get a check from us. So you have to be able to account for that. So people kind of forget about that, but it really becomes, you got to think about that.
So let's say you've gone through the process of getting in FSA, Farm Service Agency system. Once they've done that, what's kind of the next step to start talking with someone at NRCS?
And so you just can, again, contact our office. Usually anytime we'd like to be able to schedule a field visit to come out and look at the property. We're happy to talk to you over the phone. And like I said, you don't have to necessarily have the records first for us just to talk and come out and visit, but they could usually, if we come out and visit and we're going to continue on, then we're going to recommend you going to get those records established anyway. So there's no specific order, but at that point, get those things established. If we decide that maybe there's potentially something that you want to do, for example, in this case, say they're growing vegetables and they want to apply for a high tunnel, they would then fill out an EQIP application. And we'll walk you through that. The application is pretty simple. There's not much to it. It's, again, more name, address and stuff, but it's just so we can basically enter it into the computer, which is drawing on all that information that you already supplied to the Farm Service Agency. And that's just getting your foot in the door. And then we'll continue to work from you with you to take you through the whole process after that. In terms of walking you through it and applying and getting a contract written and then implementation.
That does kind of lead into my next question about what EQIP programs do you think might be relevant to Anna and Eduardo?
So for them at their level, probably the most usually what common that we're working with someone like them would potentially be, our high tunnel program, which is very popular with small producers because you're trying to get a lot out of a small footprint. And then we're doing a little more with irrigation to help people irrigate their crops efficiently and put in improved micro irrigation systems. If there was livestock involved, potentially we can, if this gets in, there's more variances here depending on the type of property. If it's, there is a lot of funding, like EQIP, one of the premises is you have to be kind of moving to a higher level of conservation, more conserving at its core. And for getting assistance for like fencing and livestock waters, we have to be doing a conversion. So we have to be taking it from a higher intensity to a lower intensity for pasture. So that around here, that pretty much falls in line with taking something out of row crop production, growing corn and soybeans, and then putting it into pasture. So you the land would have to have that sort of cropping history to be eligible for that. Again,
right.
So, or there has to be like a related water quality problem, like protection, like if there was a stream on the property or a pond or a lake or something that we're trying to exclude livestock from, then fencing and water as other things can come in. So,
Yeah.
but that's kind of what we go out, and that's why we go out and look and kind of analyze like what potentially could work for this given property.
So it's sort of the mission of NRCS is to conserve resources, particularly soil and water. So sometimes I think people I talk with get a little confused about the different USDA programs, and NRCS and EQIP aren't just about, I want to start a farm, I want to be more profitable. It's kind of the public interest that these tax dollars are being used for, is for protecting these natural resources. So that's why the programs that you're talking about are kind of focused on things that making it more financially viable for farmers to do the things they need to do to protect the soil and water.
Yeah, because many of these items, there isn't a direct return on profit in the short term, and there's a cost, and that's why they put the money behind it to offset some of that, because we know long term they will help people be far more sustainably and help with profit, but in the short term you don't get a lot out of them. So that's why the money's there to sort of bridge over that period. So
that makes sense. So we've talked about diversified vegetable growers and livestock producers. Are there programs that a larger scale vegetable producer might consider that a smaller scale one might not?
So I would say that some of the still same programs apply. I mean, I've had larger producers apply for high tunnels and irrigation, but they may, if they're a larger scale, they may need more help with, they may have some erosion issues because of the size of the property and depending on where you are. So again, EQIP can help do that. We can help with stabilization. They may be interested in, we have, programs to help, say if they are using a lot of chemicals or anything like that, to help safely store those chemicals and mix those things. There's a program called agrochemical facility containments that we do frequently with some of our larger, operators.
Wasn't familiar with that one. What about fruit producers or commodity crop grain, corn and soybean growers?
So very similar, I would say the same things, anything with erosion. The chemical storage things are very popular with our larger grain producers because they're storing large amounts of liquid, usually fertilizer and chemicals. So containment and security. But we also then sort of get into soil health issues, like things, again, soil erosion can always be tied back to many things in agriculture, but also, cover crops and, other things to help boost soil health that's, been around. This has been, I wouldn't say it's new, it's been around for a long time, but we have a lot of options now for people that can, help offset some of these costs for leaving land fallow or putting in a cover crop as opposed to putting in a production crop to help build and improve soil health.
Awesome. So let's say Anne and Eduardo have rented a field. They've got maybe a 3-year lease on it. They'd like to apply for a high tunnel program. What would you tell them at that point?
At that point, I would say we would get them. I would send the FSA, get their records established, and then we would have them fill out an EQIP application. One of the things, EQIP is you can sign up anytime, but we have funding cycles throughout the year. The funding for EQIP is annually funded, and one of the things that I guess instinctive for me, but we operate on a federal fiscal year. So it's not January, calendar year, most people think calendar year. So you have to kind of think a little bit different from October 1 to September 30th. And money comes in the late fall, early winter. If things are going well politically, all subject to change, as we know. But that's kind of when things start. And then we have cycles. So a lot of times people will come to me and say, July, well, we've had all of our signups and stuff in the previous winter. We'll still work with you, and you can take an application and work on your records, but you'd be kind of punted to the next year when the next batch of money comes in. So that's sort of, you just kind of have to think that way. And many of the federal programs operate on that cycle. And once the money, because it's only annual money, once the money is gone for that year, then we're done. So sometimes we could run out in June and then we're done, and we have to wait for the next fiscal year to come along. So we like to say it's continuous, but in sign up, but it's in some ways it's only as long as the money's there. So you just have to take that into account,
So in terms of doing something like this on rented land, what would you say about talking to their landlord?
So if they're going to do it on rented land, they will need to get permission, which there's a form that we have just with the landowner acknowledging that they're going to put in this structure, say a high tunnel. It doesn't hold them to anything. They're not obligated to keep it there. But they do just need to give permission. And it's more of them, notifying them that we're going to be built. There's going to be this structural thing on there. We do have some programs where they're more incentive-based practices where it revolves around management. I mean, an easy one's like cover crop. You don't have to get any permission because it's just an annual thing.
It's a short-term
if you're going to put
thing.
something that's permanent, you're going to plant something permanent or in the ground or build something structurally, you do have to get permission. So like I said, I usually tell people they're not committed, doesn't hold them to anything. There's been some other programs. The state has a different conservation program where they do put things on deeds.
Oh my goodness.
That can be sort of a barrier for rented ground in terms of implementing practices, because a lot of landowners don't want that on their deed, So
while I'm thinking about this, I think I should mention that anyone considering stuff like this on rented land, check out our UMD's Ag Law Education Initiative, because they have some great stuff on leases, and you should probably talk with your landlord about if you're going to build a structure, who owns the structure. And with high tunnels, they're sort of portable in that, with a few days and some handy people, you can rip it up and move it somewhere else if you have a really, really big truck. But it's not easy. So you might want to talk with your landlord about when your lease ends, who owns the high tunnel.
And sometimes I've seen some leases. I've seen one with one of our producers in the city where that was the high tunnels and some of the stuff was written into the lease. So if it's written into the lease, then we don't need the other form.
Okay.
So it's just showing that if they're acknowledging it through the lease that you can build a hoop house or high tunnel, whatever you want to call it, then we don't need a second form.
So it's like when I wanted to get a cat when I was in an apartment and I needed to get a notice from my landlord that said it was okay to have a cat. But if your lease says you can have pets, you don't fine. So okay. So let's say you've applied, you're approved. What happens then?
So once you're approved, let me back up. You apply. All of our programs, EQIP is a competitive process. So it isn't just apply and then you get approved. You have to be ranked. And because it's just annual appropriated money, you're going to go into a pot. They match things up to like things like high tunnels only compete with high tunnels.
Okay. Irrigation
is just with irrigation. So, and then they allocate certain money for that. So once you get approved, you've been selected for funding, then we will develop a contract. You'll sign the contract. And now the important thing to remember is a lot of people like to call these grants, and that term gets kind of interchanged, but these aren't traditional grants where you get the money up front. We pay on the back end after installation, so it's more reimbursement. So once that money's in the contract, it's locked in the contract. It can't be taken away. It's not at the whims of Congress or anybody else. It's there. It's locked in for you for the length of that contract. And then you draw on it as you do things. And at that point, once it's active, there's the clock is ticking, and depending on how long the contracts are written for, they're usually from 1 to 5 years, depending on how much we're doing. And at that point, you got to start to there's like an implementation schedule that you're supposed to be following in terms of getting stuff done. We can adjust things as we go along, but at some point you have to start doing things. And the program at a minimum requires that you complete one thing within 12 months of the contract started. So that's why I like to tell people, think about, if you're applying for what do I want to get accomplished in the next 12 months, what can I do? And that's what we should focus on. A lot of people have, I may want to put a high tunnel up and I may want to do some grazing stuff. Well, we don't need to do it all at once. The programs are there every year. It's best to get one thing done and then come back and reapply. Don't worry about I hate to say, I don't always want to say this, but there's usually plenty of money. And if you get yourself in a situation where you can't fulfill the contract and then you have to cancel or terminate it, then you kind of go on like the naughty list for a while, and it will prevent you for a period of time from getting any future funding. So we want to kind of set ourselves up for success, So
that's really important.
That's why I say just don't try to do everything at once. Usually get one thing done and then, build up from there. So, and like I said, we'll use the high tunnel because it's an easy example. It's on the contract holder, whoever it is. We don't tell you, we have some standards. We have things to show you, like the minimum requirements, but we're not going to build it for you. You're going to have to go find the parts, the pieces, find a contractor. If you're going to use a contractor, you're going to know exactly what you're going to get. We have a rate. You'll know what kind of money. The money will be pretty clear in terms of what you're going to get reimbursed. So then it's kind of on you to get it installed. And once it's installed, we'll just come out and double check it, and then we pay you. We pay pretty quickly. We usually, if you can get it done, we can turn around in usually 2 weeks or so.
That's faster than the university pays their invoices.
Yeah. But like I said, it's got to be fully done. I have some people I have my high tunnel up, but I don't have any plastic on. Well, that's not fully done. So once it's done, then we can reimburse usually pretty quickly. It's just that direct deposit. But that's why, also do some of your research on the front end before you get into a contract, because maybe it's going to cost more than you thought. The reimbursement rates are set up on there's a flat rate, like a per square foot cost. And in theory, for our beginning farmers, someone like who we're talking about here, they would qualify for our beginning farmer rates, which are, we qualify, if you want a farmer definition, anybody who's been farming for less than 10 years is considered a beginning farmer with USDA. And you get the 90% rate that we call it, which is a higher rate than, say, if traditional farmer been farming for 40 years, their rates are around 75%.
And that's 75% of what is kind of the book costs of this activity.
Yes, it's what we have as an established rate. We update our rates annually, and we say, to do this thing, this is what it's going to cost. And our rates are, what's the best way to describe it? They include it's materials and labor included. So it's all in one. There isn't a separate labor rate and materials rate. It's just one rate. They combine it all together and come up with one rate.
So it's not like it's you have 75% of whatever you spend. NRCS has this budget of, it should cost you this much to build a high tunnel, and we will pay for 75% of this amount up to that if you have receipts.
Yes. Yeah. So we don't need receipts.
Okay.
We're going to pay that amount. Okay. Which is, we will pay that amount. So that's why I was getting ready to say this is it's kind of variable. It could be 90% or 75. it could be 110. It also could be 50, you know, and if, as most people know, in the current environment, I've had times that when things were very cheap and easy to get, your rates might be all up around 90 or it totally covered. And right now I hear people like it's probably somewhere less than the 75 just because of cost of stuff goes up. And like I said, and the thing is, once that contract, that price is locked in. So that's kind of, you know, it's a double-edged sword. You're guaranteed that price, but we're not going to adjust it for inflation. You know, we don't have a way of doing that. So that's another reason why I say, don't let things go out for too long. Because as we most know, the 21 one, we would all like the 2017 price of maybe where some things were in 2017, and the 21 is very different. So going out 5 years is nothing ever stays the same. So you kind of want to get it done in that 12 months is a good kind of time frame to kind of keep your prices stable. After you start to go out beyond that, you're going to get a lot more fluctuation.
That's wise. I guess that you mentioned that the beginning farmers have access to kind of a higher reimbursement rate. I think, do minority or historically underserved farmers also have that, I think? Yeah,
so we have three categories. It's beginning farmer, which is less than 10 years. Anybody who's considered historically underserved or socially disadvantaged, so that's any minority group. Except women, as a solo, as a female, doesn't disqualify you. And then the other one is socially disadvantaged, which is I'm sorry, not so. That was is limited resource, and that is you have to make under a certain income threshold. And there's a website on USDA that you can look up, and it's by county, and you just type in your county and it's going to tell you if your annual adjusted gross income was below this amount, then you would, you know, qualify for the higher reimbursement rate. So, and you self-certify that. So those all get you the higher rate.
Thank you. So we've been kind of talking about, I think we've pretty much finished up kind of the process.
Yeah.
We've been kind of talking about mostly beginning farmers. If you ran into a more established farmer, someone who had been farming for more than 10 years, but had never worked with NRCS before, what would you say to them about why they should consider NRCS as a resource?
I guess I would say that probably it's just that, you know, we've been doing this for 80 plus years as an agency. We have lots of technical experience. It isn't just people like myself backing us. You know, we have professional engineers on staff, you know, biologists, wetland specialists, soil scientists. You know, we have, and we can go to these resources, and it's all free. You know, we don't charge for any of it. And we're also very focused on, I would say, locally based. Like, we've been in these areas, and in Maryland, we've been in most of the counties for 70 plus years. And so we've worked with a lot of people. We've worked with a lot of different things over the years, and we've kind of learned what works and doesn't work. You know, it's not coming from like one cookie cutter federal answer for everything. We tailor it to what our local needs are. You know, every state is different, you know, and even at our state level, you know, we have our own state standards at work in Maryland for the type of soils and climate and geography that we have, you know, and we'll be willing to kind of, and we've learned over the years to how to tweak that. So it's, I just like, you know, I like to say, we just come with a lot of experience of doing this. Trust us a little bit. You're not the first person we've seen come in, or with, you know, with an erosion problem, or you know.
Yeah.
So
kind of thinking about that technical assistance. We've been talking a lot about EQIP, I think, because everyone likes to hear about money.
Yeah.
But outside of EQIP, what's an example of how NRCS might work with a farmer?
So any of our services, if you want, like some people we work with, I'll use a good example. There's a lot of, we don't have a lot of them here, but there's certain people think of the Amish, like they don't usually participate in government programs, but they will take our technical assistance. So we can always design something or give you specs or give you information, how to install a certain thing, and that's free. Like we'll give that to you. You don't have to take the money. You can do that, and if you want to use your own money, there's people who do that. That will just do it on their own. One of the big things that we do have is soils information. Like traditionally, going back, NRCS as an agency was tasked, again back in 80 years ago, with mapping all the soils in the whole country. So we have mapped everything out there and updated everything, and we have soil scientists. So like we can kind of come out, we can give you soils information, we can help you interpret soils information from those maps, because that's all available online now through something called the Web Soil Survey.
Really helpful.
Wonderful. Very helpful. And if you need more detailed information, we can come out, and even to the point like we have resource soil scientists who can come out and do very specific like soil borings and looking at things too.
And just to clarify, I talk with a lot of people who are still learning about what the different kinds of soil analyses are. So if you're thinking about a soil fertility test that would tell you what fertilizer to add, that's different. You send that off to a lab, but you might talk to NRCS about, do I have a sandy soil or a clay soil, which is about kind of the physical ability of the soil to grow plants.
Yes. Is it going to be well drained or not well drained? Those the physical attributes of the soil.
Why is there water coming up out of the soil here has been something I've sent people to you to figure out.
Yeah. So there's just, we can just provide that information, and usually much like, what you do in extension, we can, if it's something we can help you with, like I get people who have woodlands and forestry related issues, and I'm not a forester, but we work with the Maryland Forest Service, so we can get you in the direction of at least someone who maybe be able to help you with that, or get you over to extension in some cases. There's like we have we know the contacts to it. If we can't provide it, we'll point you in the right direction, hopefully.
You have a lot of really awesome resources. I think we've exhausted my questions.
Yeah.
What have we not talked about yet today that you think is important, particularly for historically underserved farmers?
I guess, we've kind of hit on some of the things that I had in here, but it really helps. I like to say, to come in with a little bit of experience. We're not going to teach you how to farm. That's maybe more extensible, but NRCS isn't there to teach you how to farm. There's other places you can go to do that. It's wonderful if you have in the example, like they've done a little bit, they're kind of making the next step. Having some sort of business plan. I'm sure you preach this too, of like what you want to do, kind of help give some structure to this. But we're not going to help you with that. I like to say that if you want to get into farming, we're not really at step A, we're kind of more at like maybe C or D, when we kind of come in and can start to help you. The other thing is we can't, because I got this question yesterday from a phone call from someone, is like I was saying, everything's conservation related. I can't help you buy a tractor. We don't have programs to help you, buy land. There's other programs within, most are centered around loans within USDA, which is a whole nother.
I'll be talking with the Farm Service Agency about the loans in another video.
Yes. So there's so that's not us, you mentioned in there, she wanted to build some sort of, processing facilities. Like, again, that's over with the Farm Service Agency, or other parts of
the Ag Marketing Service, I think, has some stuff related to that.
Yeah. So, and then we don't help you with marketing. I put that down here as another thing too. So just kind of, this whole process is kind of learning who does what, and who can help you with what, and what each one's have their limitations. So
Yeah, there's a lot of different departments within the USDA. And like you said, NRCS might not cover everything, but you can
Yeah.
kind of send people to the right direction, even if
Yeah.
they're looking for something else.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I think that's probably about it.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I guess the last thing I want to say is, find your local NRCS office. There's good odds there's someone very friendly and knowledgeable there, like Eric, who can talk with you about these things.
Yeah, and I think if you just go to the USDA website and find a local service center, and a map will pop up, and you can just kind of click to your state, click to your county, and then it'll take you to right. It'll give you the contacts there.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk.
Yep.